So I just recently sat down with Canadian IFBB pro Robin Strand for a one-on-one interview, and it went really well. He's a super cool guy, super intelligent. Make sure to check out his podcast. He has one called Canadian Beef that he does with a couple other Canadian pros. And man, I was really impressed. I did not expect him to be so knowledgeable about things like digestive health. And the main reason I wanted to talk to him was because I was so impressed with his training technique. And I know a lot of you guys found me through the critique I did of Mike Israetel. And I think Robin is a great example of a high-level IFBB pro who actually uses proper lifting form that doesn't force like an excessive range of motion just to get a stretch, that knows how to keep tension on the targeted tissues. So I was really impressed with his technique, and I wanted to sit down and talk with him about where he got that from and what the particular benefits are that he feels he gets from training that style. So be sure to take a listen. I hope you enjoy it. Look out for part 2. We cover a lot of things on digestive health in that part. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.
Looking through your like IG and stuff, man, I am like a really big fan of the way that you train. I don't know what is going on out there. Like there's like a whole group of people out there who just train like assholes now. And I don't know what it is. When I watch you train, it's like you have tension on the muscle. You're not like in some crazy extended spine position. Your ribs are actually moving. You're not forcing range of motion to what you don't have. Your feet are lined up. You're keeping tension like on your quads, not trying to just orient to a position. So where did you get that from? Is that the way you've always trained? Do you think there are specific benefits to that? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I've been really fortunate to learn from a lot of different like top coaches, top trainers. I had a trainer since I was 18 years old, you know, Good Life trainer. That, you know, first coach, he took me from like, you know, just a regular old kid, and then I'm winning like, you know, junior Mr. Ontario and like all this kind of stuff. And that's why I totally believe in just having more trainers, more mentors, more coaches to learn from. So Ben Pekulski was a huge mentor for me. Got a chance to train with him back in 2016 up until 2021 here and there. But with Ben being so busy, he was kind of just like here and there, you know, like an enigma. Like sometimes I'd see him 6 a.m., we smash a workout, don't see him for a few months, but he would always tell me kind of what the next steps would be. And one thing that he did say was, I need to find Eric Seifert. I'm like, Eric Seifert, okay, I got to find this guy. So I went down to Tampa, which I heard he was down there. And I'm like looking around for him and like calling around like all people that knew him, right? I'm like, how do I get a hold of this guy? Oh, he's super busy. So I'm just trying to learn from people in the meantime. Finally, I come to Pure, and Eric Seifert's here. I started working with Eric. For 2 years now, I've been working with Eric, and he's taught me, like, to be honest, like I want to give credit to Eric because he's taught me most of my training skill that I have now, and pretty much all the rest of it from maybe 10% from various trainers, but then all the rest of it is from my other mentor, BLP Benoit Lapierre. Between BLP Benoit Lapierre and Eric Seifert, these two guys, they've taught me so much about training that, you know, I'm just eternally grateful for it, because otherwise you get lost in the things that you just, you know, discussed, is all these things that you see online in order to move weights or to have some other purpose other than just learning how to like line up and like target that muscle. And these two gentlemen have been so about targeting that muscle and stimulating that muscle. And that's why I've just been so like attracted to that style of training, is because I've had injuries, and they only ever happen to me when I get out of that type of training. They never happen to me, knock on wood, when I'm training the way that I was taught. When I'm training the way that I observe people do, and let me try that today. Guess what? Injury. Because I'm going out of what I know. And because I've been training for so long, it's not like I'm perfect with training. I'll still hurt myself. It's like, but it's the fact that I'm able to feel things in a way that allows me to train to the point where I know basically when I'm done. Versus I was lost for so long to be like, intensity is everything. I need the intensity. I need to be just dead. If I'm not dead, then I didn't do enough. And it was the combination of with Eric and his focus on biomechanics, and Benoit with his focus on like both of them focus on the internal stimulus. But Benoit is, people don't like this, but he's very touchy and creating a mind muscle connection with the power of touch, which is extremely important. Not only does it put your mind into the muscle because when you're touching, but it also creates an electric signal. So you're also using the energy from the person, which anyways, we can go on a tangent about that, but that's one thing. But then also the thinking about it too. It's like, where is my mind? Is my mind like on like how far this bar is moving, or is my mind like inside the muscle? And can I feel the inside to the outside? And can I sit on the bottom of my pec? Can I sit on the inside of my pec? Can I feel those? How much volume does that take up? That kind of stuff, right? We don't even think about that. We just think about like bar, weight, move it, A to B. And even when people think they're not doing that, most of the time they are, because we get caught in that. So what I've tried to do in order to get away from that is try to take out all distractions. So if I'm training, I don't train with music anymore, because the music makes me sometimes a little bit too hyped.
Yeah.
If I'm not hyped enough, then I don't like it and I want to find a song that makes me hyped. So I'm always searching for
Same way.
something. Yeah. So at first it was a little dull. I'm like, this is dull. This is boring. But then it just gave me a time to be like, oh, I'm rested now. I can actually
Yeah.
think, I can feel my heart rate, and like, the music's pretty good today. Let's just go and work. Let's just get this work done here. This is fun. And so I found a way to make that fun. And I think that's important too. Because there's always a lot of anxiety about having to lift a certain amount of weight, or having to execute or put forth a certain amount of effort, which, another thing that Eric taught me was, it's so important that you always give your best effort. You always give 100%. And that's just what a champion does, but you can only give 100% of what's available in your gas tank for that day. So if I show up on that day and I had a really brutal morning with clients and stress and something bad happened to my dog, maybe I'm showing up with 70%. I'm still going to give 100%, but I have to realize that it's a 70% day. So I'm not going to double scoop the stims to try to get to that 80 to 90 to 100%, because by doing that, I'm redlining, and that's where I get injured.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's the old analogy of don't annihilate, stimulate, don't annihilate. And I think that's just such brilliant wisdom that's been lost.
Well, you say that, and I mean, I think with your form you can do this, but I mean, like I'm looking at you, you're doing like drop sets to failure, force reps and stuff too. So you are going to failure and past failure. But I think, and I'm sure you're aware, this is like your biomechanics are on point. That you going to failure, past failure looks a lot different than someone who's already extremely oriented in a pattern, and then they're pushing to like absolute failure where they've got nowhere to go. Like for us, I train the same way. It's like our failure, I'm assuming the same, is like once we start to lose a little bit of that relative motion, we start to orient a little bit, and we can't keep it right where we want it. Well, that's failure for me. Is that kind of how it is for you?
Yeah. So this is how I frame things now, is I go in with a very specific plan of how I'm going to train by deciding what I'm going to focus on, which we usually, okay, well, I'm going to focus on like chest today. Let's say, okay, we're going to do a leg day today. We're going to do a leg day today, and we're going to do hack squats today. But there's different ways to do a hack squat. There's different ways to do a barbell squat. There's different ways to do lunges, leg press. So what if I would say, okay, today I'm training quads, just quads. So I want my leg extension, you can't fuck it up. But a hack squat, you could do a hack squat and get a lot of glutes. I don't want to use my glutes. I have already really big glutes. I want more quads. So if I go past a certain point, where at some point, biomechanically, this is the correct way to train your quad, because the quad is going over my toe and my ankle is bending. So my knee is projecting towards the mirror, and then it's moving away from the mirror, as opposed to my hips going down and my hips going up. That's just a different way of thinking about it. Because if I want more quad and I want like more adductor and stuff, or sorry, if I want more glute and I want more adductor, I'm going to go wide. I'm going to go all the way down. If I
Yeah.
want to isolate and get more of my quad, then I'm probably only going to go to the point where my knee stops coming over my toe. I'm now not getting any more knee flexion. At that point, I'm going to have to give up space from my hip in order to continue going down. Same thing with the barbell squat. Same thing with a lunge. If I do a lunge and I want to target my glutes, then I'm going to stretch back. I'm really going to have my knee come in more, push my glute out, really stretch that glute out. The knee is actually coming inside my toe. Now I'm going to get more glute. Or if I think, okay, I want to have my ankle flex more, again, it's almost the same thing. As ankle has to bend, knee has to bend, right? I'm not getting as much. I'm also maybe doing a little bit of a shorter step. All of these things it just influences the way that the tension is put on the muscle. So I'm constantly thinking, if I'm going today to train legs, then I really want to focus on quads. So I'm going to do leg extensions. I'm going to do hack squats for quads. I'm going to do leg press for quads. I'm going to do lunges for quads. It's quad day, and the thing is, I might do maybe one thing for hamstrings to warm it up. But the thing is, the main thing is still the main thing, and it's the quads. Same idea if I'm going to train back, because most people think thickness, width, back, it's all the same. No, I have exercises for my traps. I have exercises for my lats. And I want to determine which one I'm focusing on before I go into that exercise, even before I go into that workout. Because if I need more traps and I'm just going to be doing, okay, I'll do a lot of high rows and all these things, I'm not thinking, okay, I need to really move my shoulders blades up and in to get those traps working. That's all it is, man. That's all I'm thinking about now.
Yeah, just kind of like you said, if we want quads, we want to keep the range of motion where it's on quads, not to where we have to go duck feed and get all of our adductors and glutes involved and thinking that that bigger range of motion is going to help with the quads. I think these people, they should really dive into biomechanics. If you want to nerd out, learn about biomechanics so you can really get the benefits of it. And I think it goes deeper than just obviously like preventing injuries. I think it goes into your aesthetics as well, because you see like the powerlifter stuff. If you lift like a powerlifter through extreme extension and not with a lot of what's called like relative motion, things moving relative and interdependently of each other, your connective tissue, your fascia, it starts to transfer force a lot more. And that's why you don't see, in my opinion, I mean, can't really prove it, but I've talked to a lot of people who are kind of think along the same lines. Like, that's why I think bodybuilders in general, we have like way better separation because we are making things work interdependently, like kind of on their own instead of moving everything in unison like that. So I think it goes beyond just, okay, I can like not get hurt. I think it's going to make you more aesthetic as well, and definitely help as far as like your V taper, making sure that we have like a good ribs that can do everything, aren't just completely flared the whole time. I see. Are you so the trainer you're working with now currently, is that the one on your IG? Is that the guy you're talking about? Is that Eric?
That's
Okay, yeah,
Eric, yeah.
yeah. I see him talking about ribs all the time, and I literally never see anyone in the bodybuilding industry talk about that. Is there anything you can specifically point at, like biomechanically, that you think you guys do a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, the ribs is definitely a good point, because when you're talking about, let's say we're doing chest training, for example, I think one of the best examples for how to use your rib cage is on a decline press. Because if you go on a decline press and you flare your rib cage is going to be up and open like this. So if I do a decline press, I'm going to essentially be turning that into a flat press, as opposed to just locking down my rib cage, which means I have to use my core a little bit because I have to pull that rib cage down towards my pelvis. Now the rib cage is staying flattened down, which means I can really get that decline range of motion more so with my shoulders than trying to actually arch to do it. So,
Exactly.
it's definitely easier to show someone in person how to do these things, which is why it's one thing to go through Eric's course and do it in theory online. It's another thing to then work with him in person and actually have him, like, again, poking things. No, this is the area you need to keep contracted and things like this, or just explaining things in different ways. Like, again, a rib cage thing where people don't really think about it. Most people will say, well, it's chest up, chest up. We got to keep that chest up. And Eric's like, chest is going to be staying forward, and we're going to be now locking down this rib cage. So it just, now I'm performing an exercise in a different way. Now it's a completely different exercise. So this thing about like novel stimulus, that becomes a real thing when you work with a trainer who can actually change your form on an
Yeah,
exercise. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
it's huge. Like it's something that people always miss, and you talk like say like on that decline. Yeah, people like they set like that because they want to like get the stretch preset, but it's like that's just orienting around the rib cage, right? If I set the ribs, like you said, and have some like intra-abdominal pressure from my, internal, external obliques, as I'm coming up, not that they stay in place, they're not locked in, but they move relative to everything. So now you get relative eccentric lengthening instead of just starting from that position, which that's more time under tension. That's what we all want. There's a lot little fine details to the mechanics that I think people kind of throw out the window. Because I mean, programming is important. Obviously, you got to have good programming, but I think if you've got perfect mechanics, I honestly think that'll take you further in the long run than having like the perfect programming. As long as you don't have just dog shit programming.
Yeah. We talked about that too, because a lot of the younger guys ask, like, do you need to have a perfect program, or can you have a bad program if you just give it like all intensity? And I'm like, well, it's kind of both, dude. Like, like the thing is like you can get so lost in the sauce when it comes to like you're saying, like look, study biomechanics and study like these nerds online and stuff like that. Like I'm a nerd too, because I love to learn, but I love to learn by like doing it. Like I want to be in the gym and like doing this stuff. I want to,
Exactly.
that's why I have a passion for it. I want to train and feel it. I want to be taught by someone and touch the stuff, and then I can go to someone else and touch their things and show them and have them be like, fuck man, like you taught me something new today. Because I've been training people in gyms, working from, from Good Lives to just, small little studios over a decade. And, most trainers, they tout themselves as being like a hardcore trainer, because by the time you're done with that client, the client's like on the floor, or they puked, or like they gave up, or like something cramped, or like, you know, or God forbid they get hurt, right? And it's like that's not really, like, you can't replicate that. You're not actually learning something other than how you're just teaching someone how to like smash themselves to bits.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable progress. So I was like, man, like I always have to be so hyped up to train someone, and if I'm not in the right mindset, like, you know, they're not going to have the best workout, because I'm not going to be like yelling at them, and my throat hurts today, so I don't want to train anybody today because I can't yell at them, right? And they're not going to be happy because they want that value of the intensity. But I realized that's not what people come to me for. They come to me because I teach them stuff, and then they can go back to their training, and now they have something to progress with, because I gave them a new exercise, or I gave them a way to train that it doesn't hurt their elbow. Now they feel the tricep, and they can go back and make progress and come back and, hey, Robin, you know, that's been really great. And a lot of people tell me that they actually, when I train with them, they actually feel better, instead of like, that's like they're like, I'm sore, but I feel good. I'm sore, but my posture feels better. I'm like, wow, that's probably the best thing I ever could have heard from a client, as opposed to like, man, I'm so sore, I can't get out of bed today. I'm like, that's awesome, but like, did you take the day off work, dude? Like,
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then that comes to, you actually can improve your joint mobility if you are loading with like a stack and intra-abdominal pressure, like you said. So
yeah.
I think that, like I said, I don't know why certain people got in their head that like stretch is everything. Active stretch is what's important, like right on the muscle. Are you doing any like other like modalities? Do you do anything for like recovery? You're doing any deep tissue or any kind of therapy at all?
So yeah, so what I do for the most part is I will see
Sauna?
Eric as well. I see Eric for muscle activation. He does muscle
Is it
activation
MAT?
techniques, MAT.
Okay,
Yep.
that's what I started with
Um,
actually too. Yeah.
oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of MAT. I worked with even like some of the level one MAT practitioners back when I first learned about it. And even level one guys can do a lot of really great stuff. I'm working on it myself as well. So, you know, Eric is a master. He's like the best of the best, and he can basically fix everything. So, you know, if and when I get hurt, or if and when I have tweaks, I go to Eric. He puts me on the table. We will do a 90-minute session where he explained this in the podcast that we did on the Canadian Beef podcast. But basically, he works with muscle spindle and Golgi tendons, so turning on and off muscles with muscle activation techniques. So I think that stuff is great.
And you're going against them and stuff, like
Yeah, so
activating. Yeah.
I don't do anything basic. Well, I mean, I will a little bit. Like, he'll have me contract, but it's not hard. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, you know, it's easy stuff. But it's then you go back and you have your training session, things start clicking again. And as long as you're combining that with good training practice, and you're doing that on a regular basis, it's maintenance, right? So
Yeah.
I prefer, in my opinion, I prefer MAT over any other therapy, but I will kind of add on to that kind of as an additive. Massage therapy for relaxation, I think, is great. um I will also do acupuncture as well. I'll
Mm.
do electric acupuncture, which is very similar. It's kind of like more of an invasive MAT, kind of, if you will. But I'm a huge fan of acupuncture as well. I would probably rank things in terms of best to worst for me, or maybe best value to least value. I would just go MAT, acupuncture,
Hmm.
RMT.
Only acupuncture with the electric stim, or what about just normal?
Uh, I think both can be good, but I think the electric stim kind of like 1,000 times it.
Yeah, and you said similar to MAT stuff, so you feel like it's kind of helping you wake stuff up.
Exactly. And then even
Oh,
similarly, Eric, when I'm like really messed up, Eric will bring in the electric stim, like the newbie machine or
yeah,
the thing like this, and then we'll do MAT combined with that, which is like,
yeah,
you're really broken.
definitely.
Okay, I'm gonna bring in my $20,000 machine to fix
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do any like extra mobility work on your own? Anything as far as that
So
goes?
I do incorporate foam rolling on basically a daily basis. I'll foam roll basically every day, at least for 5 or 10 minutes, no matter what. And then I will also stretch in the morning after I do my cardio and ab routine. I'll stretch for like 5 or 10 minutes. It's nothing crazy, but just static stretching. Prior to training, I'll do more of the activation stuff,
Yeah,
lengthening of
exactly.
muscles through contracted stuff, but which is similar to Eldoa. So ELDOA,
Yeah,
Eldoa is kind of like
I'll do it.
the, it's like the athletic version of yoga, in
Yeah.
my opinion. So it deals with like contraction based postures, which are going to influence your fascia and improve your posture. So I'm a huge fan of Eldoa. But
I
yeah,
do, I
other
do a
than
couple of
that,
their moves pretty regularly. I don't do a whole lot of them, but I like a couple of the moves for really like I do like the kneeling guy where you're tilting over the side and that hip flexion, really get that trunk going pretty loose. I like Eldoa. There's some cool stuff in there for sure. I think it's
yeah,
important to just get a hand on like everything, get a little bit of everything so you can really pick what works for you.
exactly. That's what it is. It's customizable. You make your own program with it, right? It's not like with, and I've worked with different people who are Eldo instructors, and they'll kind of go through like a different one for your whole body, but you feel where you need to stretch. Like you said, you have a couple favorites. I have a couple favorites that I do, and there's some that I might rotate through. But for the most part, it's like the same ones that I repeat because they're all beneficial. And then some Eldoa postures are going to be like more specific to like your L4 or your L5 or just wherever you feel like there's an opportunity to create more space.
Right.
Essentially.
You might be interested in looking into some of the PRI stuff that I do. Are you familiar with Postural Restoration Institute?
No, you have to tell me about that.
It's basically just deals with our natural asymmetries more or less, and it kind of blends a lot with MAT. I blend a lot of this stuff. It might help with MAT in the sense that you can maybe get your rib cage and spine a little lined up before you do it. It's kind of how I do it a lot. Actually, Antoine made a post a while ago, and then I looked on it, and he had an issue. I forget exactly what it was, but it was really related to PRI. And someone in the comments said you should see a PRI practitioner. I was surprised that anyone had mentioned. Then I commented on. I got like 70 likes on there. But I think it's something that's really cool. It's super deep, so it's kind of like the same thing. You just kind of like pull what you need. But the gist of it, what I use it for is mainly to reposition my clients or myself to make sure that we don't have any kind of like sacral rotation going on, so that way we're starting straight, and then your hip mobility is so much better, your rib cage mobility is so much better, because if your sacrum straight, your T12 doesn't get crooked. So I like to, there's a lot to it. I usually just do it to get the repositioning, get that, and then I typically do like MAT or just load through there. And I think it's really helpful because you see a lot of bodybuilders that present asymmetrically, right? They'll have, the right adductor will be really overdeveloped, while the left vastus lateralis a lot of times is overdeveloped. A lot of times that right lat overdeveloped, or sometimes it's so tight it doesn't pop out that good. And like the uneven abs, a lot of times that has to do with the pelvis being off a little bit. So that's some cool stuff. Just some stuff you might look into a little bit on your own. You seem to really like this kind of stuff. I'm sure Eric's probably aware of it a little bit too.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, no, I love all this kind of stuff, man, because it's like, to me, it's more revolutionary. And it kind of bridges the gap more between like the physiotherapy and the hardcore
Exactly.
training. Because every time I get a client, or I just talk to someone who's like, yeah, I'm seeing a physiotherapist, but like nothing is getting better, I'm just like, damn, dude, because
Exactly.
I worked in a physiotherapy clinic and more or less got fired because I just wanted things to be better all the time. I'm like, there's just so many things we can improve here. And the way that it works, essentially is what they told me is like, hey man, we have a system here that works. It makes us money. We have people that they keep coming back, and so don't mess with it.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
terrible.
but it pains you to have a patient or a client come in and be like, hey, so are we making progress here? And they're like, nope, like months, no progress. That's
Yeah,
it's not. It gets depressing.
it is like super rewarding to be able to like have somebody really improve their quality of life, right? I'm sure you've done that plenty of times training, to like have somebody who couldn't do stuff be able to do without pain, whether it's something simple like playing with their grandkids, or something like being able to push themselves in the gym hard for the first time in forever. Being able to increase somebody's workload capacity, to me, is always a lot more gratifying than like regressing, which sometimes you do have to regress to something. But I think giving them that workload capacity is much better if you can.
It's huge when you get like an injury too, because I mean, like when you have like a major injury, that's when you really like you snap into this kind of like it's the fight or flight thing. You're like, man, is this it for me? Because as soon as you get that injury, it's like you went from being like an invincible fucking superhuman to like, oh no, I'm immortal, like I'm actually mortal, and I'm
Yeah.
like I can be broken. And so you have to like rethink your whole strategy at that point, right? So that's why I believe it's so valuable, because if you can take an athlete who's competing and trying to compete at the highest level, take him from like being so self-defeated because they had an injury to then bring them back to full confidence, that is huge.
Yeah, big time. And one thing you probably noticed too is, I mean, if you were working out, like you said in the past, maybe not with as tight as form, like when you work out with the kind of form you're using now, the mobility stuff you got to do is not that much. Because like you said, you're kind of doing mobility training when you're working out because you're loading your joints properly. So I noticed like when I train, like one of my big things, I train a lot of bodybuilders in person and online that just have like mobility issues and pain and that kind of stuff. And it's like really not that hard to not have pain as a bodybuilder if you just stay within your range and you do a little bit of mobility work. You don't have to do too much. We're not rock climbers. We're not doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We don't need some extreme crazy range of motion, and we're in a completely controlled environment, right? So it's like we don't really have a lot of excuses for just having just terrible, terrible joints. You know, we're in control of everything.
Yeah, 100%. The thing, yeah, I mean, the thing is what I always thought was, and this is what's talked about, is that it's actually would be normal for a bodybuilder to have pains in their joints or to be beat up, and there's only like a certain amount that your joint can handle. But I don't believe that's true anymore. I did believe it was true because I saw it within the bodybuilders, but I think that's because of other reasons. I don't think it's just because your joints have like a limit on them or anything like that.
1,000%. 1,000%.
I think it really just comes down to like how you treat them, and how you train them. And just like you alluded to, it's like there's certain ways of training that are going to be more stressful for your tendons or more stressful for your muscles. And actually having a combination of that is really like the best. But you have to decide like how much of that focus, again, like what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to have the strongest tendons ever or the strongest muscles ever? Obviously, we need to have a balance, right?
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting in understanding how like actually training a tendon would be different than training a muscle. Again, with the bicep injury, so I'm like, well, I can't train this muscle right now because the muscle just it won't respond because it's injured. So I just went to train the tendon, and every morning I would just train the tendon with a isometric in the stretched position from different
Perfect.
positions, pronated, hammer, supinated, and I just every morning, because I was like, I just can't let this thing beat me. I need to find a way. And so just listening to podcasts and talking to different, specialists in the field, tendon repair, it's like you got your BPC 157, you got your TB 500, you're going to have like a bone broth collagen supplement, some vitamin C. That's your post-workout stack. Get in the gym, train the tendon every morning, try to get it stronger, then try to incorporate it back into your regular training so you can get back to your regular training much quicker that way. And that way I was still able to train my bicep. Like basically, I did a bicep workout like a week before. I did a week before Toronto, and I did like maybe 1 or 2 workouts in the meantime as well. So 3 bicep workouts right after tendon tear, I think is pretty good considering I was on a contact prep and basically catabolic the whole time. So there's definitely ways around things. You just basically the whole point that I wanted to make with that prep is that too many people quit. Too many people give up before they've really given themselves a chance. I wanted to be, if anything, I just wanted to be a role model to show people that if you have colitis, you can still compete at your best. If you have a bicep tear, hamstring tear, any kind of tear, there's still a way to get there, to get to your goal, but managing it, but finding a way.
It's not like you just got on stage. You looked fucking really good. Like that was probably, I mean, in my opinion, that's probably your best look. What do you think?
It's just because I wouldn't let it, at the time, I just wouldn't let it defeat me. I was like, this is not going to beat me. And I think that's pretty much all it took. Well, I guess it sounds funny to say that now, but yeah, that was the main thing. As long as I knew in my mind that it wasn't going to beat me, there was like moments that, it's like, do we have to go to the hospital tonight? I'm like, no, because if we have to go tonight, that means that it's over. So it's like,
unless you're Braden Curry, you can come get 4th at the Olympia after going to the hospital.
That's right. Yeah, that's true, man. There's always a way, and anything can happen, right? If you know one thing, whether it's you get an injury and you're a week out from the Olympia and you can't compete in the Olympia, or you get an injury and you're 10 weeks out, it can happen at any time. You always have to be ready. And the one thing that most bodybuilders are the most fearful of is having that injury.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to train smart. Yeah.
Yep.
You were talking about the connective tissue. That's really interesting. Like, I love that you're into this. I don't know any bodybuilders that ever use that word, hardly. I did a podcast with John Quint recently. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Do you know who John Quint is?
I do not, unfortunately.
So he's the head neuromuscular therapist for Westside Barbell. So he worked with Louis. Louis brought him in, and he also worked with some bodybuilders, Justin Compton, back in the day. He really helped Justin with his presentation. I don't know if you remember. I mean, I'm sure you're a Justin Compton fan, right? He was fucking stud.
Oh, yeah, I worked with Justin Compton. He was a coach for 2019 New York my pro debut.
Oh, great. Yeah. So do you remember when he came back with a vacuum, just looking sick and aesthetic, you know, when you're, and a lot of that he credited to John Quint. And John Quint was one of my instructors for the Functional Range Systems internal strength model. He works with a lot of NFL teams, and a lot of what we do there is focus on the connective tissue architecture and the loading capacity. And like what you were saying, the like isometrics at length, those are fantastic, like eccentrics at length. And what he was telling me was, when you train this connective tissue, basically it's kind of like the scaffolding to allow you to have more red tissue, have more muscle form underneath it. And obviously he kind of went into like the separation as well. But he's saying that if you can really train this connective tissue, you're going to allow your body to have a lot more room to push up against the skin as well. And you're going to have a lot more room for muscle to grow. So I think that's awesome. I think that a little bit of like overloaded negatives and ballistic isometrics are awesome to throw in at the end of a workout when the muscle's like fully engorged.
Oh yeah, for sure. I thought it was really interesting that Ian Valier was doing the isometrics with his sprinting coach and doing these like heavy loaded was he doing like 3-plate front squats or something like with these isometric pauses and different range. I was like, wow, that is so cool. I thought, you know, if he incorporated that into like his full bodybuilding training, like imagine if he could, obviously he doesn't want to, but imagine if he was to pursue that and do a comeback. Because that again, like you get to a certain age when you start thinking about more like, okay, like I need to get my structure to continue to handle this amount of muscle mass on it. So not everybody's structurally built as strong as Branch Warren, apparently. So we have to sometimes like train that structure in order to not hypertrophy, but I guess whatever the word for, yeah, like the scaffolding, the strengthening of those connective tissues is going to be crucial.